So I'm just gonna quickly share my screen for all of y'all. This is everyone. Yep. And I'll just quickly explain what Qoom is, and then I'll explain all the things you guys are interested in, like what is HTML, what is CSS, what is web development, and how do we get started? So first, to answer this, what is Qoom? In terms of what we're using it for in this workshop, it's going to be where our folder structure is going to be. It's going to be what we're coding in. So think of like a text editor, but for languages. And it's going to be the host service that's going to be displaying our actual website. And among that, you could just kind of bunch it up into the little tagline, social coding space for students. Now you can read this. Basically, it was talking about our coding editor and a lot of the fun, amazing tools. For example, when I click on this, you can not only edit, but you can collaboratively edit and share your link. I'll be showing how to share your link, publish, and even give you guys a little bit of an idea of like more advanced web design tools like a database or authentication API that require a lot of backend. But with Qoom, we're able to kind of put it in an easier language and handle all of that backend so you guys can code and better your project and develop it without handling any of that boring hard stuff. Among the IDE is our workshops and all of our community projects. So that includes our tutorials and our blogs where you can get step-by-step, just like this workshop actually. It's found in that link right there. I can actually post it. So in that link is the workshop I'm basically going to be giving, as well as other links to further your programming journey. And there's other step-by-step tutorials with, as I said, some higher level intermediate web design like a database or advanced CSS. But besides that, you also can join all of the student programs that Qoom has. Like you could join the creator group, which is a selective, let's see if I can pull it up, a selective group for high school and college students that code and make real world Qoom products. I actually joined it in January, and from that creator group, and you can see all the projects here, I then joined the tech leadership program, which is what I am in, which hosts workshops, and it's what Sammy's in. And it's really amazing that I am so biased towards it. And then also you could join our ambassador program for just anybody interested in programming and sharing that to the world. So all of you guys here today. And it's super flexible in whatever the responsibilities and hours. We just are very student first and trying to get you guys to change the world. But it's a quick intro of Qoom. I'm going to drop a link, one of the links again, so we can all create an account, because in Qoom.io, we're actually going to be doing this workshop in our IDE. So think Replit. It's actually exactly like Replit, except you can now have collaborative editing. That way you don't have to download any IDEs, local IDEs like Vim or Visual Studio's Code, if you've heard of those before. And we can see our website in real time as we edit code. So kind of get us situated in creating a Qoom account. Don't worry, you just need an email, password, and maybe your first name and last name, I think. Once we're done with that, I can then start explaining what is HTML, what is CSS, what is the syntax, and coding you guys' first lines of code. Actually, I think this is a good idea to showcase the end product. So this is kind of what we're hoping for, but again, the beauty, I can customize it to 1 billion. So my journal actually might end up not looking like this. I might change a few colors, even choose a different font, but it's going to be an online journal where you can have titles and entries, and it's going to be responsive in the fact that you can see it clearly on mobile as well. So let's first create a Qoom account, and you can hit sign up. Yeah, I did first name, last name. Hopefully you guys are able to check that out before when I drop the link a few minutes before the workshop officially started. If not, I'm going to give you guys time to sign up anyway. And so once you do that, you give a password and you hit create account. But I already have an account, so I'm actually going to skip that step and just log in. And then it may or may not ask you to enter in your coding space. It usually asks that for users who have created an account already. Okay, once you create an account, you're going to be then taken to your coding space, which is this beautiful file manager type thing. And as soon as I hit create new project, that is when I'll pause and give you guys time to create. So, also, I believe it was introduced as well. Sammy and I, but mostly Sammy when I'm missing it, will be helping to answer chat or any questions, but feel free to unmute as well. This is going to be definitely an open space. And the nice thing about coding in Qoom is that you can just share your IDE's URL, so I can see your code live up front and answer any questions or any suggestions you guys have. So you should have started to navigate into your coding space. And what you're going to see is just kind of actually nothing, but in the future, you would see all the projects you've done. Now, I've done a lot because I've been using Qoom for a lot. But for now, you're just going to create a new project. And you can see that I created another journal below there, but I'll call this journal 123. You can name it whatever you want. I just think you need spacing. And so it should automatically open up, as I said, the IDE. And now I'm going to take the time to pause and help you guys get all situated. So again, in chat, let me know if I ran over that a little too fast. I can easily just rewind the steps and show you guys.
Maybe put a thumbs up if you're done.
It's going to be a thanks, Sammy. Oh, and I forgot to mention, when you create your name when you go to Qoom.io, you create your first name and last name. I believe the database doesn't take in any sort of accents or special characters. So please try to keep your name in plain text. Okay, I'll wait just a few more seconds for anybody else. Of course, put done in the chat if you're able to, and then after that, I'll get started. All right, okay. So I guess this is actually a good page to start in because now I'm going to explain what is HTML and CSS. So HTML is an abbreviation that stands for Hypertext Markup Language, I believe. And you can think of it as the backbone, the protocol for all websites anywhere in the world. So you have programming languages that like React or frameworks like Gatsby or Next.js, if you heard of those in the web development sphere. All of those are basically written in JavaScript, but using HTML actions. So everything boils down and can be processed as HTML. Again, hypertext markup language. I'll be showing it how to write that syntax of HTML in just a second. So you can think of HTML as splitting up into semantic elements, or just elements and little divisions with names. So you can see in any website, take Qoom.io, you got this top content that sticks at the top. That's called a nav bar. And you have, say, the title and maybe some subpage links and maybe the account. And you have this main whole place in the website and even into separate divs. You got this main, you have this like title and this picture, and you have this different main. You can see because the background's slightly different, or different section. Main would be the name of the element or any other name. And at the very bottom, usually on all websites, you can see the you would see the footer, but actually the very bottom right now is the thing that's kind of stuck in the bottom, no matter where you scroll, kind of like the nav bar. And that's the cookies. Well, I mean, that's where the cookies usually are. They're usually stuck at some place on a website, and you can't take them off unless you agree. So I'm going to agree. And then once that's gone, that pop-up is gone, now you can see the footer as well as trying to talk about. And the footer just has usually the company's name or organization's name and the copyright and other attributes that are needed, and maybe some social media links like Qoom has. So that's basically how websites are, the general layout. And we're actually going to be using a lot, 3 specifically, of those kind of sections I was talking about when we create our journal. So our journal, I'm giving a little preview, but we'll take a step back in a second, has a nav and this main content with like all of our entries, and then the footer with your name and then maybe the year. And then CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And it's a way to customize and style your content. You can change properties like background, font, positioning, color, sizing. And the cascading part in cascading style sheets means that it works with a system of parents and children, kind of like HTML and CSS. And what parents and children mean is just the kind of lingo that means like you got this element and then you have another element inside it. That's the same thing for CSS. You just have things inside other things, and obviously the thing inside the thing is the child. We're going to be visualizing that a lot more with parents and children and classes and IDs further down this workshop. There's a couple ways you can actually implement CSS, since CSS is a whole different protocol or language than HTML. But I'll show you guys that in just a second. Now, I'm actually going to explain what the syntax of CSS and HTML are using this coding editor. So hopefully, as soon as you create your new project, again, with just hitting new project, that button right there, and typing in the name, I believe if I just go over here again, and yes, new project, and then typing in the name, would have been taken automatically to this space. So I'm just going to explain what this IDE in this coding space is from left to right. So from the left side, you have all those new buttons, new file, how to upload a different file, and then our database tool. I won't be using the database tool in this workshop, but it is super interesting to get into. You can check it out in all of our different tutorials as well. And so now I'm going to start clicking through the different files. Now, readme.md, MD stands for Markdown. It is basically another protocol, a way to kind of format your content. So you have 2 hashtags, which means headers, and we're not going to be using this file, but this file is a great way to get started on what your project is, why it's useful, and answering all these questions to kind of get a good idea of what you want to try to create. For me, I have a great idea of what I want to try to create. It's going to be an online journal, so I don't need to input any text into this. Index.html is the first half of where we're going to be coding a lot in. Again, it's written in HTML, hypertext markup language. Don't try to remember that, it's all right. Everyone knows what HTML generally is supposed to be. So mostly I'd say HTML, backbone of websites. That's what I take out of it. And then next is the project.json. JSON is another language. It is mainly trying to tell the computer what to do with this file, this folder, because we have this folder called journal123, and it first goes to the project.json, and it's like, okay, what do I show the user? And the computer's telling it index.html. So it's going to show the HTML page. That's what we want it to do. Again, we don't really need to touch project.json unless you want to make some big changes into your project. And then next is script.js. So JS stands for JavaScript. JavaScript, if you haven't heard of it, it's the backend, it's the capitalized, italicized, the backend language of websites and web pages and web development. They're all kind of interchangeable. Again, we won't be using JavaScript in this workshop, but there's a million different ways to get started in JavaScript. And I definitely think the first step is learning HTML and CSS, like you guys are going to do here. And then styles.css is the second half of where we're going to be coding the most in. So that's, again, customizing the HTML file. So the way that the HTML file actually communicates or takes and gets information from the CSS file, because if you actually just have, like, as I said, the files here, the computer doesn't know where and how to read it. The computer is going to go to the JSON and go to index.html, but it won't go to the styles file. And that's where the first lines of HTML come in. So to quickly explain the skeleton that Qoom has provided you, it is how all HTML files need to be formatted. It has the HTML tag, and a tag is just a name with a caret in front of it and a closing caret. And then the closing tag, like you could say this body for an example, has the name again in the carets, but it has a / in front of it. So I would say this is the opening tag, this first half, there we go. And that is this closing tag of body. And that's a little bit intro into what kind of vocabulary that HTML has. But anyway, as I was saying, the way that the HTML file gets the information and kind of connects to the CSS file is through this link tag. And basically it is saying to reference the styles.css file, and it is the style sheet. So cascading style sheet, the style sheet styling for the HTML file. Now that was a lot. I definitely understand that. And I think the first good thing to do is when you have a lot of information is to implement it and start actually making it your own. And we can do that by writing our first lines of HTML and CSS. So let's get started. As I kind of introduced, the way to write HTML is with a bunch of elements. And you do that with an opening caret, or a less than caret technically, the name of the element you want, and then the closing caret. After that, Qoom IDE will automatically provide the closing tag. So what I just did and created was the paragraph element, paragraph tag. And you can write text inside of it like, hello world, pretty customary. And then the nice thing, as I said about Qoom, is that it automatically updates on to the display and website, which you can see from this side. Oh, pardon, I forgot to change. So I must have skipped this part, but right quickly below, you have, again, the different, on the left side, drop down menu. You have, again, the different options and other abilities that the Qoom ID has, like you can display the website and collab. And here's the get link, as what I was kind of alluding to in the beginning, where you can share this link with me and I can see over your coding and your website and be able to answer any bugs or any questions. But I need to go to the settings and actually change the font size because it might look a little small for you guys. There we go. Oopsie, a little bit bigger. Okay, font size 20. Love that. And then as you can see, there's a bunch of different other customization that you can do as well. For me, I'm good here. Okay, now this should look a little bit better. Okay, so I'm just gonna go over what I just said previously, and so it's a little bit more clear visually. And what I'm gonna do is create a caret, and then the name of the element and a closing caret. That's it. Those 3 characters, and then Qoom ID automatically finishes the element tag with its closing tag. So there you go, /. And then what I did was in between those tags, I wrote hello world. So in between the tags is whatever the content is inside of it. And as I said before, you can put other elements inside that. Like you could put another paragraph tag inside of it and put another, I guess, more content. And this paragraph tag would be the child of the outer paragraph tag. So that's what I kind of mean by parents and children. So I'm just going to delete that real quick. And now the way to actually style this and to write in CSS is first navigating over to the CSS file. And you can see it's kind of got this beginning CSS writing. Let me actually delete the body for now and create my own lines of code. And of course, I'm quickly demoing how to write in HTML and CSS. And then I'm going to go back and begin actually creating the skeleton of our journal website. So if you feel like this is a little fast, you can just take a break and watch and learn and how I write HTML and CSS. And then I'll tell you when we can start and when we are starting to code the actual journal. So in CSS, it's written in decoration blocks. That's the vocabulary. What that is basically is the name of the element or the thing of that you're trying to get. So paragraph would be mine, the paragraph tag, and then you have an opening curly bracket, and then that automatically provides you with a closing curly bracket, the Qoom ID. Now, in between that, you want to write the actual property. So there's a couple properties that I said before, like color, and then colon, and then the value of that property. And then it will automatically provide you with a semicolon to mark the ending of that decoration line. So as you can see on the right-hand side with the website, Qoom automatically updated it. So the CSS now styles our font, the color red. And there's a couple other different values for coloring and different values for width. We'll get into that in just a second. Okay, that's sorry, I just took a second to look at chat. Okay, so that is how you write in HTML and CSS. And now I'm actually going to head back over and we're going to create this time the first lines of our journal. So I'm just going to pop back over the journal and show you guys what it needs to look like. As you see, you got 3 sections, the nav, which is the top, and you got the main, which is where all the actual content and important stuff is, and the footer, which is the least important stuff in my opinion. So let's start doing that in HTML. The nice thing about HTML is that as soon as you kind of get the syntax with the tag, with the carets and greater than, less than signs, everything in the naming of the elements start to become a little bit easier. So the nav bar, it's just that. And now outside of the nav bar, I'm going to create a new line and say main. So opening caret, the name of the element, closing caret, and then that provides you with the closing tag of it. And then outside of that, I'm going to create footer element. Now there's a footer element. There's a couple of other elements. We're actually going to be using 3 more, I think. But I actually can drop a link to another article that provides kind of a list of other elements and their names and kind of the default of what they're used for. So that's our nav, main, and footer. And another element we're actually going to use is an H1 tag. H1 tag stands for 1. There's H2, and H3. And then there's paragraph. That's kind of the default sizing that HTML provides. And within that header tag, I'm going to write the title of my webpage, which is going to be journal. And as you can see, if you kind of remember what the paragraph tag looked like, I'm just going to write the paragraph tag just to show you guys the difference. The header tag, oh, ignore the red, but it looks a little bit different than the paragraph tag in that it's bold and bigger. So see, there's actually some default CSS provided with those, as I said, elements like the H header 1, header 2, and header 3 compared to the paragraph. But I'm just going to do that for now and have it like this. So this is what, oh, forgot the attributions. As I said, this is like the least important thing for me when I'm looking at a website. But anyway, in your footer tag, you can put attributions, the name of your website, and maybe like the year. And that's it for the HTML in the beginning. But another way, if you're following along the tutorial, I'm on part 2, I think, part 2. And another way that you can actually organize this is, I believe if I just do the magic wand, which is another handy tool in the Qoom IDE, which you can see it's like called Beautify This Code. And basically that organizes the code in a nice formatted tab way. So you got the tab to indicate that this element, this head element, this head element is within this HTML element. And that's what I wanted to have here. So inside the nav element, we have the H1 element. So it's a little bit more clear to visualize and see in your code. And so, as I said, that's kind of the backbone of our journal in HTML. Now we get to the really fun part, and that is the CSS. So first thing I'm going to write is first delete that, and I'm going to put a universal selector. Now what that is Shift 8 on keyboards. It is the asterisk character. And what the universal selector is, it just means that it's the styling for every single element on the web page. So whatever styling I put inside this declaration block, it's going to work for every single element. So to do that, I'm actually going to write a few lines of code to kind of get started, and it's really good to kind of practice the lines of code I'm about to write when you're creating a web page, because if you notice this on the website, there is kind of spacing between the journal and the Qoom, and all the text is a little bit of a space between the text and the edge of the actual website. So it may be a little bit weird to look at on this side, but if I actually hit the display button, click on that, and that will display the website. So maybe you can see a little bit clearer, but there's spacing on the edge before it hits the end of the left side, or before it's the left side or the end of the web page / viewport. And the viewport is just basically what the user is viewing it on. So if you had a user viewing this on mobile, the viewport width and height would be different than a user viewing this website on a computer. So, and as you can see, when I close that tab, I kind of lost that little panel of my website. And you can easily open up that panel again by clicking on that arrow over there. I think someone answered and then asked and then answered themselves in chat as well how to do that. So anyway, back to this declaration block. This asterisk, universal selector, I want to take away that spacing and padding on the sides. Oop, I kind of gave that away. We're going to be putting padding, and so I'm just kind of quickly write a line of padding and then a margin of 0. And so what I'm doing is, again, padding is the value I want to look at, and then, excuse me, it's the property I want to look at. I'm setting it to 0 pixels. So as you can see, now the text and elements are lined up 0 pixels away from all the edges. And actually, you don't even need to write the pixels, because there's certain default values and other properties that CSS assumes unless we actually call it out. So as I just said, the browser is actually the one that gives you that default padding and margin. And padding and margin, for now, you can just think of them as spacing regarding the element that we're talking about. So when I say the element, I mean all elements for this one, because the universal selector is styling every single element on the web page. So we have the margin and padding, the spacing of the elements set to 0. And again, there's a couple different ways you can actually measure certain widths and height. Like for example, you can do viewport width and viewport height, and those measurements are relative to the user's screen. And so therefore that makes the web page a little bit more responsive. So you can have a different size, an image that sizes correctly, even if you're viewing it on mobile. But for now, we're just gonna stick to pixels. And if you don't know, pixels are kind of the basic measurement, actually the all measurement, the universal measurement of all screens. So aside from that, I actually want to pick a new item, a new property. So if you will allow me, I'm going to drop a link in chat as to what I'm about to do. And please feel free to follow along, because this is one of my favorite parts of doing this tutorial. And it's actually picking the different font for your website. So think of it like a Google Doc or Microsoft Word if you use that, where you want to change the font and the styling of all the letters itself. So what I just did was drop a link to fonts.google.com, which is just a great place that provides different font families. And so now I'm just gonna turn it to bright mode. Sorry for all of you guys, but I believe it is now like 12 p.m. PST. So now I'm just gonna choose kind of font I want. And as you can see, there's fonts that are just a little bit more clear to read versus others. This is all up to you. And this is where you can start really customizing your journal to make it look like how you want to show to the world. So for me, I will choose, where is it? Pop-ins. And so once you click a font, again, after this, I'm going to copy paste the code necessary. And then I'm going to give you guys time in a few seconds to kind of catch up as well. So once you click on your font family, you can see the different subfamilies there are. So for example, thin, italic, I guess really bold, all the way over there. Oh, there's special stuff. But anyway, what I want to focus on is just picking whatever subfamily you want. So any of these lines and clicking select this style. And so what that does is as soon as you dismiss that, it opens up a panel where you can see what style subfamily you've selected. So now I want to focus your attention to the second half of this pop-up. And it is, if you're starting to recognize and guess, that's a caret, and then a name, and then a closing caret. And so that's written a lot like HTML words and syntax. And if you guess that, then you are correct. So this button is giving us lines of code that you're able to actually implement the font family directly into your HTML. So you can copy this whole chunk of code, go over to your HTML and paste it in. But as you can see, that's kind of a lot of lines of code. And I'm going to actually head over to the @import, which is written in CSS. So what this style tag is actually looking in HTML because of the closing and opening tags is just telling the computer that it's written in HTML, or CSS. So there's a couple ways you can actually write CSS. For example, you don't even need to link it to a different file. Like you can just go here and use the element style. And then here's where you can write all of your styling tags. And that would be called not inline, but internal styling. Some people like to do that, but once you start styling a lot, and you're going to see that there's a lot of, usually, and especially in this tutorial, there's going to be a lot more lines of code in the style sheet than in HTML. And so if you kind of put those files together, it gets really big and really long. So that's why a lot of people like to have external styling with this link referral. But anyway, to move over here, I'm going to copy and paste this line of code and paste it in here. Paste it in the CSS file. So what I'm going to do is paste this line at the very top of the file because the computer reads the file from top to bottom. So you want to think of it like a funnel where all of your general and universal styling, like the universal selector, should be at the top, and all of your specific styling should be at the bottom of the file. So I'm just going to do the @import, which is basically saying, kind of like this link referral in HTML, it's telling the computer to go over to this URL, which provides the font family. And as you can see, nothing changed. Nothing changed yet. And so what you need to do is, well, for me, I first need to move my zoom panel and then copy this line of code and paste it into your CSS. Specifically, paste it in as a property, as a declaration line. So you can see that's calling this property, and then it's giving the values. So that's the pop-ins family that I selected. And so now you can see the font all the font has changed. So it's in a much more pretty styling, in my opinion.
Can I interrupt you just briefly? Because I think this is a good question.
Yeah.
Can we combine the two, HTML and CSS? Because you were talking about types of inputting the CSS into your HTML.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry. I don't know if you can hear that in the background. I live straight off a train. But so if you mean combining the CSS and HTML, CSS and HTML are different languages and protocols all in themselves. So you can't technically like combine it. You can think of them as different languages. Like you can't combine English and Chinese, but you can combine where they're actually written in. And as I was kind of talking about before, there's different ways to style your HTML. Like you can have external styling, which points to all of the code written in CSS is in a different file. Most people like to have it in styles.css. Or you could have it internal. So you can create the style element like that. And now whatever's in this element can be written in CSS. And the HTML file will be able to know that and use that styling. And there's one more I didn't talk about, and that is called inline styling. And what that is actually within the elements, you can give them certain properties in HTML, kind of like what you do in CSS. And one of them is, as you can probably guess, style. And they do a set equals to and provide a string or text. That's what these quotes tell us. Now, also you can use like these double quotes or single quotes. It doesn't really matter, especially if you have programmed before, so long as you're able to match the different quotations. But anyway, this is called internal styling. So in this text, you can write whatever you want, whatever styling you want. So I believe you can just do like this, and then have the different properties and values like that. So now this nav bar has the style of color and red. Most people don't use inline styling because, again, there could be a lot of styling for one element, and that line of code is going to get really long and kind of confuse you, or at least it confused me, on where the actual HTML content is and where the style ends. So those are the 3 ways you can actually implement styling into your file. I hope that answers your question. I also hope that gave a good amount of time for everybody to pick their fonts and implement that into your CSS. So just to stop for a few seconds, your CSS should look something like this, where it has the padding margin. For now, you can think of them as spacing, and then the font family we chose. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick break. So again, for all of you guys who are following along, I'm still in part 2 of the 3-part article that is describing this workshop I'm giving. So what that means is you're actually able to see the demo code, and at this link where you can see the demo website, the final journal. That's really nice, because if you ever get lost in what I'm speaking about, or if I'm going a little too fast and you aren't able to ask me to stop or the workshop's ending, you can actually reference that article and code as long or as short as you want in your own time. So this is what the style sheet should look like in the end. And now I'm trying to think, what's the next style? Yes, the nav bar. So we're going to style.
Sorry, one question. If we use a different font for different text, do we need to import that URL too?
Yeah. And actually, there's a couple different, like as I was saying, subfamilies. And there's different ways you can actually style the one font family itself. But yes, to answer the question, if you have different font families in all, you would need to import them like this, and then copy paste that line to whatever specific element you want to style. But there's a couple other attributes and properties that you can style that font family specifically. For example, like font weight, and then you can have bold or different values. So now all of the elements, or whatever element has a style, so this one's all, would be bold. And that's just a couple more ways you could style your text even more. So as I was, there we go, okay. As I was kind of talking about a few seconds ago, we are now going to style the nav bar. And that's gonna be really fun because it's gonna introduce us to padding, which is gonna be great. So what we wanna do is, if you aren't over there already, head over back to your CSS file and type in and create the new declaration block, code, your new declaration block. So we wanna style the nav, so the name of the declaration block is gonna be styling the nav. And first thing I wanna do is, just in case, have the element to width 100%. So what that means is the nav bar, the nav element, will span 100% of the width of the screen. Now that's pretty easy to understand or kind of conceptually get, because you're just spanning 100% of the screen width-wise, no matter what viewport or what screen you're looking at. But there's a couple other ways I said before that you can measure width. It's the same thing as measuring padding. For example, there's viewport height, and there's also viewport width. For now, I want to keep it as 100%, because that's really great for me and my usage. Now that the element's at 100%, I want to center the text. So I'll do that by calling out the text align property and then giving it the value center. So you can see as it updates with text, whatever is in the nav bar. So you have that H1 tag will be centered in the element itself. So now after that width, I'm going to think, oh, yes, okay. I'm going to drop another link in chat, and this is another one of my fun favorite parts. Whenever I drop a link, it just means you have even more ability to customize what you want. So now what I'm going to do is head over to that link myself. And I just pulled out a color picker. So as it was in the very beginning when we were writing our first lines of code together, I set the color property to equal red. So color was red, if that looks familiar, for a paragraph tag. And then that red showed really familiar. Now, red is just a default value that's provided with the CSS and HTML and that the computer can understand. But you can customize and change the color any way you want. Like you can use this, I'm forgetting the technical term for this, but you can use this color picker. And just like if you are a digital artist, you'll be able to recognize that this is kind of where you can choose any color. The same thing here. So you can pick any color you want. And the way we can get that color and tell the computer that that's the color is by 3 ways. And this article is really nice and provides us all 3 ways. So just to quickly introduce them, we have hex decimals, which is a 3-digit line of code. Yes, that has the prefix of a hashtag. And hexadecimal is, as you can see, it's on the top, which generally means that this is the most present and current way people and coders, developers, computers measure color. Now, there's other different ways, such as RGB, which measures the red, green, and blue values out of 255, the number of the color, and you can do that for anything. So if you think of like your screen, specifically like your TV screen, and if you guys have watched WandaVision, you can see that Disney ad over there. But all the screens, especially older televisions, you can kind of see the individual pixels, and all of those are made by changing out the values of red, green, and blue, and that's it. Like there's no other colors there because red, green, or blue are primary. And there's also this archaic way of measuring colors and telling the computer to measure it is by HSL. Now, even I don't know what that stands for, and I'm not going to use it. As I said, the most current way to measure color and tell the computer what it is by hex decimals. And it's also the most concise way. So that's actually not the color I want. Like I want like a darker blue. Yes, a darker blue. And then as soon as that's done, it should give you that. And so just kind of do what I'm doing, select the color you want. And the reason I'm doing this is because I actually want to change the background color. So not the actual color of the font, like the color of the font, especially when I chose a dark color, I want the color of the font to pop out. So you can it won't show right now. It actually looks invisible because the background is white. But as soon as I change the background color with the background color property and paste in the hex decimal I had, now it should update and look really pretty like that. And again, this is where you can customize a lot. You can, for example, put the color of the text to that dark color or do whatever floats your boat. But just besides that, I actually want to add a little bit of spacing. So what I mean by that is, let me first delete that tab and go back over here. So you can see that there's like minimal spacing between the actual blue background and the font or elements and content inside it. So you can kind of think of that as you have this nav bar because we styled it blue and the content inside of it. So that H1 tag that we had in our HTML file. And there's not a lot of spacing. And I want to make it look a little bit more big. So as I kind of said in the beginning, alluded to, is you can have different spacing and different types of spacing for what you want. So padding, here's a clear definition of padding, is I actually want to do padding top and like 20 pixels. And again, you can change the 20 pixels. This is just my preference, and then also what's on this tutorial. So as you can see, now you got this huge chunk of space that's given between the content of this element. So the nav bar we're styling, which you can tell by the blue, and the elements inside of it, or the content inside of it. And a way to kind of visualize padding a little bit more clearly is if I pop open the actual website, and then if I right click and hit inspect. So what I'm doing is heading over to the dev tools. Ooh, I do not want that. It's heading over to the dev tools. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can, as I just did, right click and hit inspect. You can do Control-Shift-I, function 11. Some computers have it differently. But basically, you want to open this dev tools, which is the developer tools that are within the browser itself. And all browsers are the same. Actually, no, they're not. But all browsers have developer tools. I know Firefox is notoriously good for the way that they're able to visualize like CSS grids. So I would recommend that browser. But anyway, for now, Chrome is really great for what we need. So if I highlight over and just hover over, to the nav element in the HTML file, you can see that there's like this blue and there's this orange that doesn't look clearly orange, but it is orange, I promise you, within the blue, but it's not touching the actual journal element, the actual H1 element there. And what that is the spacing. It is the internal spacing. So padding is the internal spacing. So you can see that there's this orange that's separating the element from its content by that many pixels. So if I scroll over to the CSS, they have this beautiful diagram that's kind of showing it. So you have this whole element. If I actually click on the nav, you have this whole element, which is represented in blue. It's blue on blue, it looks so weird. And then you have the padding of the actual element. So that, again, as I've been trying to kind of say, is the spacing between the element and its children element. So the elements inside it. That's the idea of kind of parent and children elements. And then you have the border or edge of the actual element itself. So the edge of the blue, the edge of the nav bar, and then the margin. We're actually going to be using margin a lot more with our titles and data, but you can kind of see the difference, and especially in this demo where we had the padding in the nav bar and margin in like these H1 tags and these paragraph tags, because the spacing with padding is happening internally and changing the spacing between the parent element or the element we're talking about and its children, versus the margin spacing. They're both spacing, padding and margin, but margin is outside of the element and it's putting in the spacing and the space between the element and the other elements surrounding it, so not its children. And you can think of that as external spacing. So you can see that this H1 element is actually like that size. And the padding is happening outside of the element itself, versus nav bar, the padding is happening inside of the element. So I'm just going to close that out, and that's it for the nav bar. To code in the footer, I'm going to do that in just a second. For now, I'm just going to take a quick pause for you guys to get caught up. I'm going to leave my CSS file up for a few more seconds, for a few long seconds actually, because I know CSS can be kind of hard to wrap your head around in the beginning. And then once I give that break, I'm going to head over to the actual styling of footer. And of course, feel free to drop your questions in chat. I see that you guys are doing it a lot. And thank you so much, Sammy, for answering all the questions that I haven't been able to get to. And of course, feel free to unmute as well. Oh, and of course, if you guys don't feel comfortable asking questions now in chat or using the microphone, feel free to DM me or add me in the Discord channel on Elevate Hacks. I believe it's hashtag Qoom/help or -help. And then also, I believe there was, yes, sorry, there's this option on the ID itself, the Qoom ID, and you're able to ask a question and they'll be able to send it to Qoom's Discord. So we actually have our own Discord. I cannot find the link. We're actually able to drop the link in just a few seconds, but in our Discord, that's where the help link, the ask a question panel will actually drop in our Discord channel, and we'll be able to answer it there as well. So whenever you're doing encoding in our IDE, we'll be able to assist you for any questions. And feel free to, okay, I'll drop the Discord. Oh, thank you. With Nara and I did it. Each Discord link is the same. And then to answer kind of Valerie's chat, Valerie, I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I believe my microphone is working and others can't hear me. So there might be.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I might be a problem on your end. Maybe you should restart Zoom or not. And then, oh, you can't even hear me. Just reevaluating all I said. I'm gonna drop the tutorial link in chat so she's able to get it as well. Sorry, so they're able to get it as well. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I was just gonna say that I've sent the Google form for the workshop confirmation. So everyone who's here, please fill it out.
Yeah, thank you. It helps not only the hackathon, but also us as well. Whenever you guys provide feedback, because we love to help make this workshop, make this hackathon that I've been amazingly offered to present at a lot better. So hopefully that gave you guys enough time. I'm very aware of the time. We have 7 minutes. So now we're going to code in the footer. I'm going to go over this kind of in a little bit less in depth because we're actually copying a lot of lines of our nav bar in this as well. For example, I want to have my width 100%. So I want the footer to span 100% of the screen and align the text to standard. As well, I want to pick a new background color. I copied this straight from the tutorial, not that one. Straight from the tutorial. Let me pop in so you can actually kind of see what this looks like. There we go. This pretty dark blue. And I'm just going to move my zoom panel so I can have some space and do the color white. So I got this really pretty aesthetic of dark colors, white font going. It's not looking nice. So being very aware of the time, I'm going to try to introduce you guys to another type of styling called position. Now, position is a really interesting property. It has a lot of different properties. I believe like 6 of them that you are able to choose from. So to kind of go over them kind of fast, touch on them. And also in our tutorial, we talk a little bit more in depth as well, if you want to get a more clear understanding. So to just kind of introduce it here, position static is the actual default position of any element. So this line is actually kind of assumed for every single element if it unless it's written otherwise. So that was kind of what I was talking about before, where like this pixel, or you can just have no suffix, where the computer automatically assumes certain properties and values. Now there's a couple of other different values for position, such as initial, which just sets the element back to its default position. So that would be like that, which initial, if I can spell, initial and static, we just think of them as interchangeable for now. And another value that's kind of interchangeable is fixed and absolute. And those are the ones we want to focus on today. So what absolute and fixed are? Well, okay, what fixed is to begin with, it sets the element relative to the user's screen only, that's it. So what that means is this element is not trying, doesn't care about any of the other spacing of the elements, other elements. So if I was to left, 0. So this is actually putting the coordinates or different, or the exact position that I want it to be. So if I was to do like top and left, You can see that this Qoom, this footer element, does not care that there's already a nav bar there. There is already a nav element there. It would go wherever it needs to go that is defined in the CSS. And we want to have that because we want the footer to stay at the bottom of our website always. Kind of how the nav bar is at the top of our website. So instead of top, we're actually going to do bottom. And so now you can see it drag itself all the way to the bottom, and it will stay at the bottom no matter what. Position absolute is exactly like that, except instead of having the element relative to the screen or the viewport, it's actually relative to its nearest parent or ancestor element. So what that would kind of mean is if I had this h1 tag set to absolute, but then I had this nav bar have a position of like relative or fixed, then this h1 tag will have the styling, will be relative to the nav bar. And so it's kind of hard to wrap your head around. And the way, an example I like to give is when you put elements on top of each other, kind of like we did there, but purposefully on top of each other by matching the parent element, so like the nav, with a relative position. And position relative just means that it scales with the other elements in the page. So everything is relative and initial in default. And absolute is the antithesis of that, the opposite. But anyway, so I'm going to try to run fast past this. So now I just want to have some more padding top, but this time I want to make it a little bit smaller. This is just, again, my personal preference. You do whatever you want here. And now it looks real nice, and they kind of match. So that goes with the aesthetic. That's actually too big. Wait, I don't like that one. So now I'm going to style in the actual main content. Lucky for us, the nav and the footer was the hardest thing to style. So with the main, inside the main element in your HTML file, we are going to hit create a div element. Now div, as I kind of said before, stands for division. It's just another name, another way you can structure your content. So the reason we want to have multiple divs, or any website wants to have multiple divs, is say we have a bunch of content inside one, like a title, say an h1 tag saying title, say, and a paragraph tag saying this is my journal entry. But we want to have multiple journal entries, kind of like how the demo has. You don't write a journal with one page or one entry, and that's it. What you want to have is multiple entries. So a way to organize the different entries is actually creating multiple div tags. So you're separating each entry. So I can see, at least in code, you can tell which entry ends and which one begins. We're going to be playing with that a lot when we put in class. So what classes are is another, you can think of it as another way to name your element. So instead of, if we go to our styles, instead of giving out just a general element name, we want to specify that div tag with the class elements. So if I actually delete that just for show, and I get over, highlight to the class elements, then I could do entries and say, specify the H1 child and have a margin of 12 pixels top, 0 pixels right, 18 pixels left bottom, and then 18 pixels left. What I just did was use the shorthand for margin. That's not it. 0 pixels. Okay. So what I just did was the shorthand for margin. You can think of it as going clockwise. So what that means is this margin shorthand is just saying margin top 12 pixels, margin right 0 pixels, margin bottom 0 pixels, margin left 18 pixels. And you can see that changes the margin or the outside spacing. And if I delete this class entry like that, then we're going to let it load. And you see the styling isn't happening to this div element. And the styling is only happening to an element that has the class entries. And you can denote that by a period. I didn't get a good enough time to kind of talk about what the difference between classes and IDs are, but a way to think of it is classes and IDs are basically the same for HTML and CSS. Only an ID you can only use once. So if I've had this ID property and say tree, then I can't have this ID property in a different element like this paragraph tag. The computer just won't allow that. But with classes, you can put that on multiple elements like this div tag. And so you can see the styling works for every single one of them. And to kind of top this end off, I'm just going to do the same line I did for the H1 tag, but call out the paragraph paragraph element this time. And a different set of margins. For example, say pixels, 12 pixels to the right, 0 pixels or 10 pixels bottom, and then 30 pixels to the left. Whew, okay, I know I ran over that kind of quick, but I'm so happy I was able to kind of answer questions while doing this workshop. So I believe we're just gonna kind of let that load for just a second. But in the end, hopefully what you guys are able to do is look a little bit like me and with my journal. And feel free to share this code with anybody and me if you have any more questions by clicking on this Git link, copying, or hitting publish and actually sharing it to our Qoom website, where you can see some other hackathon creations or things made in hackathon like this. Who started this? That's so cool. And then also share to our Discord. We'd love to see all the presentations and all the projects you guys made. And you can actually see mine right now. I'll do that. Just copy, and that will take you, stop my screen share, to my link. So sorry I went over just a little bit of time, but I really hope you guys are able to get a very thorough introduction and create your own journal. And if you have any more questions, again, feel free to reach out to me on Discord, just DM us, me or Sammy or Nare. We're all on the Discord. And thank you guys for coming in the morning at 11:30. I hope this was well worth it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the workshop, Alexandra. Really cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
And now I'm just going to share the QR code. Oops. And also send the link again. Yeah, I hope you can see the QR code.
Yep.
And everyone who's done with that, you can either leave and come back in 10 minutes or just hang out here, because from 12:45, we are going to have the AI ethics seminar with Ria Chervu, who is an AI ethicist at Intel. So I hope to see you all then.
Bye, guys.
Bye.